Welcome. I'm Kevin Walker with the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce, and I'm conducting today's candidate interview with Zach Bradley on behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council. The Public Policy Council is comprised of the 10 chambers of commerce serving Johnson County. They've developed today's questions focusing on business and community issues. Before we begin our Q&A, Zach, I'd like to give you an opportunity to offer a few opening comments. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're choosing to run for the De Soto City Council.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Zach Bradley. I've lived in De Soto for about 5 years. Before that, I lived in Western Shawnee for a couple of years. And what brought me to the area was my employment. Job moved me here. I've spent the last 20 years in some sort of public service, rather. I currently work for the federal government, and I have for the last 12 years. Before that, I was on active duty with the military. I'm retired from the military. I've been all sorts of public service. I've been a volunteer firefighter, EMT, as well as a reserve officer at a sheriff's department. Currently, I'm in emergency management. My personal views or beliefs are that we all have a right to live as we would like, as long as you don't interfere with the right of others to do that. And if I'm elected, I intend to have our government be as efficient as possible while being good stewards of our, I say our because it's our tax money, and our community. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about some of those views with the questions forthcoming. And that's, I'll have a little bit to say at the end, but that's a general brief overview. I don't want to go on a lecture here. Thank you again for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Appreciate you doing it. And thank you for offering a little bit of your background. Why don't we dig into the Q&A now? And I'll start with a broad one. You know, as a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
So I kind of touched on a little bit the community stewardship. Part of that is good governance, good government policy that benefits the whole of the community, not just business, not just residents, but everyone. You know, we're all in it together. So good governance, also good stewardship of our community includes ensuring that there are both good jobs. So employment is one of those, the second one, or the opportunity to pursue employment. That maybe someone wants to work outside the community, that's fine too. If we don't have access to good transportation, that inhibits the ability to have access to other jobs outside of our community. So good governance, good employment, and good housing. Housing, I think we are in an area and a time of growth that we need to be careful how we balance that. I did participate in the Designing De Soto work group. And one of the things that we noticed as a challenge in that work group in our community in particular was what they call the missing middle. So we have some very high-end housing in our community, and we have some very lower-end, lower-income housing as well. But there's not a lot in the middle. You know, you're either paying, $500,000 a month in rent, or you've got a $600,000 house. In that middle, somewhere we need to promote growth. You know, we can't make anybody build what we want built, but we can incentivize their building that. And we can control the other types of housing that's built. We also don't want to overwhelm our community. So, you know, you could put in 10,000 apartments, but is that what's best for our community? So we need to balance those things. So my top 3 issues, that was the third one, was housing. So good governance, employment opportunity, and good housing.
An important part of the job of the city council is managing the city's budget. So what are your views on the value De Soto citizens receive for their local tax dollars, and what changes, if any, would you propose to the city budget?
So one of the things, and I mentioned that as part of good governance and stewardship, is um, I I think that we receive. Well, first of all, let me back up a second. To understand it, all of that tax that we pay isn't just to the city of De Soto, right? We have other things, other millage, fire department, schools, county, state, parks, all sorts of things like that. So, what can the local government control? Well, we control the millage of the city, which operates city services, and that can affect, of course, your overall tax burden. So, to answer the question, I think that we get pretty good value for the money we pay to the city. I do think that our tax rates are fairly high, probably higher than average for some of our neighboring counties, but I also think we have better services in some of our neighboring counties. If we look at it as just the city of De Soto, I think that our city does a pretty good job of managing it. There's, of course, instances where we'd like to see things done a little better. I think one of those would be the money that was spent on the new roundabout there by the high school. I think that we got a little underserved what we were overpromised by maybe the builder or there was some confusion there. So I think that better attention to that perhaps would have created a better setup there with the roundabout. It would have been more lanes as we originally thought it would be. People thought, there's always going to be controversy with that, but we would have at least gotten more than what we got now. I think that there are opportunities to improve the use of funds that the city receives. I think that, and it's difficult to balance proactive versus reactive maintenance and repair. I think our water system needs a little help. I think the future holds better stuff, but that only comes if we plan appropriately. So spending money is never a problem for government, right? But spending it wisely sometimes is. And with the size of our community, it's important that we take those dollars that we get and invest them into things that benefit the whole of the community. Again, water treatment is a good one. Road service is a good one. I think we have pretty good street maintenance. I think we have great public works. I just think that we need to look to the future more than the short term. What's right in front of us is important. We have a water main break, we got to fix it, but we have to look to how can we prevent that in the future, and how can we invest in better infrastructure. So as far as tax and the value, I do think that we get pretty good value for our money. I also think that we need to incorporate a little more, and we did pretty good with the Designing De Soto group, but I think we need to have more of that citizen input into the budget. Not necessarily the budget per se, like line item, but how is the city spending its money? What should the city's priorities be? And yes, as elected representatives, our job is to provide that viewpoint for the city, provide that input into the management. But what drives that? We need to get that input from our citizens like we did recently. I think that was a good thing that would help with help your elected leaders, as I hope to be, to make those decisions, not just from our own personal perspective, but with the engagement of our fellow citizens.
Well, appreciate those thoughts. And let me switch gears a little bit. Over the past few years, the city of De Soto's development has dramatically increased, especially since the announcement of Panasonic coming to De Soto. How would you help continue high quality growth in De Soto, and what role, if any, do you believe the city should play in economic development to bring jobs and capital investment to the city?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, the growth is, dramatic is I would say exponential growth as it stands now, what's coming and what has already arrived. How do you continue high quality growth and avoid it's not low quality growth, but perhaps less impactful growth that's not as useful for the whole of community. Well, what role does the council play? Well, the council, as I said earlier, doesn't make anybody build anything, but we can incentivize certain buildings, and we can use the power of our of local government in controlling building codes and zoning to uh, focus where things are built and how we want to align it. If we want to have the Lexington Avenue corridor as our business corridor, along with commerce, there's ways that we can zone that and make that more attractive. There's ways that we can incentivize. We use as the citizens voted on, we use the TIF financing as the citizens voice their opinion on to attract Panasonic. Whether you like the growth or not, it's happening. And we have to control the growth, or the growth will control us. So if we want to guide the future to what we want to maintain, in a way to maintain that small town feel that De Soto has, or, obviously change is inevitable, right? But what kind of change do we want? I think the city should use, like I said, its power to assist with economic development to the extent that it's not detrimental to the city. Public funds should not be used to provide for private growth. However, that said, as with the TIF district and the financing for Panasonic, public funds mostly, for the most part, haven't been used. Panasonic, they're not paying taxes. They have that increment. So yeah, we're not receiving that money. But in 10 years, we will be. In 10 years, had they not built, we still wouldn't be receiving money because there wouldn't be anything to pay. So it's not a loss of money. I think that it's important to understand the limited revenue opportunities for the city and how we can grow, and to know that without growth of commerce and business, if we want better water, better parks, better services, we have to pay for them in higher taxes. I personally don't want to pay a lot more in higher taxes. I would prefer somebody else, like a business, pay for it. And the opportunity for more employment, as I stated earlier, is one of my goals. So I think that it has to be a careful balance that the council achieves there between individual residents, quality of life, and that small town feel, and the value that business brings in economic growth and revenue to the city to pay for the things that people want to have in their town. And I know I bounced around a little bit there. So basically, I think the role of the city council is to guide that growth using its authorities to control zoning and incentivize growth while maintaining good fiscal solvency and revenue generation into the future.
A related question, and you've touched on this a little bit already, is some of the citizens have stated that economic growth is devaluing De Soto's small town values. Do you feel that growth diminishes the community's values, and why or why not?
So I think uncontrolled growth, wild growth, diminishes value. Weeds in your yard grow fast, and a lot of them, but they don't bring value. If you control the growth of the grass and the plants and greenery you have, then it does bring value. I use that as an analogy because the growth, as I stated, the growth has to include business, and it has to include the needs of the residents. If you do nothing but build homes, then you don't have the tax base to support the services required for the residents. If you build nothing but business, then the few homes that remain live in amongst industry, and that's not a necessarily a pleasant place to live. We can look at Detroit, a very industrial city, granted, huge city compared to here, but the example is the same. When you focus only on industry, you lose out. The residents always lose. When you focus solely on residents and no industry, the residents end up being a bedroom community only, with paying exorbitant taxes to support the infrastructure that they need or want. So the council has to take into account the values that exist. To say that DeSoto is not a business city, if you look back, Panasonic's being built at Sunflower. At its height, employed 20,000 workers. That's far more than what Panasonic is intending to employ. And DeSoto grew, thrived even as a result of that. So I think that the values exist, and the values aren't whether you support business or don't, or whether you support growth or not. The values are what the community values. If you go to DeSoto High School football game on a Friday night, you can see the people from the town, from the city, and from the surrounding towns that the values can be demonstrated in the way that the citizens hold themselves in public and demonstrate their personal values. The values can be seen in when you see someone broken down on the side of the road in the city of DeSoto, somebody usually comes by to help. These are things, just as really short, brief examples of types of values. I think that the sense of community exists within DeSoto, and it's that community ethos or sense of being that makes DeSoto what it is. And so, no, I think growth is good when it's controlled and done appropriately with the whole community in mind.
What do you think are the greatest opportunities or challenges for the DeSoto economy in the next 10 years, and how would you capitalize on those things?
So we talk about the DeSoto economy. I think I would say the opportunities are obviously the industrial based growth. That's probably the number one opportunity. And in that opportunity comes support. If you're going to be moving a lot of freight by road, then you're going to be using a lot of trucks, and they're going to need fuel and things like that. I'm not saying that we should put a Love's or a Pilot or a TA in downtown DeSoto, but if we can guide the growth on the other side of 103rd, then that's a way for us to get that business that otherwise would have gone to Eudora, Olathe, Shawnee, somewhere else, right? Lenexa. I think also that one of the challenges, as I said, is to ensure that the growth that we have includes jobs that support the people that live there. Any community is going to have those lower paying or entry level, whatever you want to call them, jobs, because they provide services, and those services are needed in the community. But you want the community to embrace the people that perform those services as well. So they need housing, they need schools, they need recreation, just like everybody else. There are friends, our neighbors, fellow citizens. So when we talk about growth, we have to include both service jobs and large industry. Everything has to be included in there. The challenge is, how do you balance that between a services only economy and a production economy in your city, our city in this case. So opportunity for growth, challenge in how you control it, challenge in how you ensure that it's not a one track economy, that you have multiple opportunities and you're not solely focused. Battle Creek, Michigan's got a lot of cereal plants. That's about all they have. We've got a battery plant now coming. What else are we going to have? What else can we have? What else would benefit the city to have? Focusing on that and how you balance the needs of the city with the opportunity for growth is the challenge.
Well, before we go to any final thoughts, I've got one last question for you, Zach. What do you believe most distinguishes you from your opponents in the race and making you best suited to serve?
That's an interesting question. I don't believe in disparaging other people because our merit stands on its own. In my case, my experience in various public service roles, as well as community involvement, and in my professional role, I have part of what I do is infrastructure vulnerability analysis, hazard mitigation, threat and hazard identification, things like that. So I have an insight. I'm not an engineer, but I understand electrical distribution and supply, water distribution and supply, food, service, all these things that come together to make something run. So I have insight into various, because of my career and what I've done, into various parts of what has to happen to make a city run. So from that aspect, I think I have experience that some of the other candidates might not have, or might not have as much of. I also think that my time, both in the military, dealing with being deployed overseas and dealing with multiple cultures and religions and ethnicities and language factors has made me appreciate the viewpoint of others more. And along with that, I think being able to bring teams together. So one of the things I have to do is to take in my job is to take people with various backgrounds, both socioeconomic, education, cultural, etc., and bring them together on a cohesive team to accomplish a task or a mission. I've done emergency response stuff for a long time, and so I've seen communities at their worst and at their best, and I've seen what brings people together and what doesn't, and I've seen how to, and I have done the task of incorporating the needs and wants of a diverse group of people in various communities. And I think that's experience that is difficult to replicate without having similar life experiences as myself. And like I said, I'm not going to disparage anyone else. I think that my life of service has also led me to have a desire to serve others. Not for myself, but for the good of our community that I live in. So I think that I know that others that are in the race have served in various capacities, whether in government or military service. Some haven't. That's okay too. But I think that my particular mix of experience in education and training gives me an advantage on the whole in the sum of parts, being what they are. I think I exceed my sum of parts. The synergistic experiences, if you will, I think that makes my candidacy different from others.
Well, Zach, I thank you for taking time out of your busy day to visit with us a little bit. And as promised, I want to give you a few moments to offer any final thoughts you'd like to offer.
Sure. I think that these questions were pretty comprehensive in addressing what I think people want to know. But I want to give everyone an opportunity to contact me directly with any additional, if you have thoughts for me, or if you have questions on what I think about an issue, or if you have something that you want to know more about my past or my experience or background, anything. If you just want to reach out and chat with me to get to know me a little better, limited time here, and that's perfectly okay. I don't want to monopolize anybody's time by going on a rant or tirade or whatever you want to call it, a lecture. But my email is Zack, ZACKNIN, De Soto at gmail.com. So Zack and De Soto at gmail.com. You can reach me at. And I'm happy to have a conversation on the phone as well. Whatever is most comfortable for you. I'm also on Facebook, Zack Bradley, as a political candidate on my personal page and on my candidate page. You'll see me on there. I have a picture with myself in front of a flag and a suit. And I just want to invite everyone to let me know what they think about those issues. If they think that I've represented their views, or if I haven't in this interview, if they want to share their own views on it with me, just in general, I'm happy to hear from everyone. And whether I'm elected or not, I remain a member of this community, and I enjoy interacting with my fellow citizens. And thank you very much for taking the time to view this video, and thank you, sir, for the time to conduct this interview. That's all I really have for you. I look forward to everyone who can voting in the election, and hopefully including me in your vote choices.
Well, Zack, thank you. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and visit with you a little bit. I wish you the best of luck with your campaign for De Soto City Council. Let me just remind everyone, as Zack said, voting's coming up soon, so please make sure you get out and vote. Great way to inform yourself about the candidates and their positions is to check out our voter education website, which is votejoco.com. And you'll find all sorts of information about Zack and the other candidates for the city council. On behalf of the De Soto Chamber of Commerce, thank everybody for taking a little time to be with us today.